We pray that we will be encouraged, that we will be touched, that we will be moved to go into the streets and do those things that are going to help to uplift mankind, womankind, and children. Bless us now and keep us. This is our prayer. Amen.
And I'm the president of the Pittsburgh chapter of the A. Philip Randolph Institute. We are very pleased to present this program of lots of updated information for all of us to spread the news further beyond this room. And we will begin first with remarks by Leah Gerard, who is the International President of the United Steelworkers of America. Actually, not of America, but of America.
Back to your politics. Look, I want to tell you that I'm really excited about what we're trying to do with APRI. I want to recognize our district director down there. I just saw John DeFazio. John. You know that we've come too far to let these guys try to steal the election right out from under us.
That's right.
And this is probably the most important election of our lifetime. And we've got people like Darrell Metcalf, who I'm ashamed to say is my representative because I live up in Cranberry, and Mike Turzai, who made it real clear what they were about. They were about trying to steal the election right out in the open. And while I was in the back, I was looking through some stuff that I happened to find on the internet today. And what I found is that Congressman Elijah Cummings has written a letter October the 5th to a woman named Catherine Engelbrecht. And he's asked her to explain herself. Catherine Engelbrecht is the chairperson or the head of something called True the Vote. T-R-U-E, the vote. And what True the Vote has decided to do is systematically put together blocks of names and have their people at the polls and challenge their right to vote. If that is proven to be part of a systematic plan to deny people their chance to vote, that's a criminal act. And I'll tell you what the Steelworkers Union will do. We will contact Congressman Elijah Cummings on Tuesday and tell him if he can get the evidence on them, we'll file the lawsuit. They ought to be going to jail for trying to steal democracy out from under us. And then we all know what Metcalf and Turzai tried to do in Pennsylvania. We know it when he was arrogant enough to get up and to say that voter ID will make sure that Mitt Romney wins Pennsylvania. Done. So they shouldn't hide behind anything. We ought to understand, and many of you in the room do, but there's a lot of people younger, of every race and every religion, who may not know enough to know that when they left John Lewis for dead on the bridge in Birmingham, he was marching for the right to vote. Dr. King didn't just fight for African Americans. Dr. King fought for everyone. He not only fought for the right to vote, but he fought for decent housing, decent education, decent health care. He fought for the right for workers to join a union. And we cannot, in 2012, let these people roll back history. We cannot let them set us back. Too many people were beaten, and too many people were hurt, and too many people were killed for the right to vote. And I got to tell you, it makes me livid I have this thing that I tell our members. I don't know if it's because of the age I've reached, but I wake up every morning and I just sort of touch myself and realize I'm still alive, which I think is really cool. That makes me happy. Then I get up and I get ready to go to work. And if I'm in a hotel and I got to walk to the meeting, or if I'm at home and I got to drive to the office or wherever it is I'm going, between the time I get up and the time I get to where I'm going, I'm, excuse the language, pissed off. And the reason I am is you just got to think of the injustice that's in our society. People have to come to understand that lots of what's going on attacking our president is because we've still got too many people in this country that aren't comfortable enough to know that we've got a black man in the White House and he's earned every damn bit of that job. He's been the best president we've had. Let me make this really clear. He's been the best president we've had since Lyndon Johnson, of every party. He has accomplished more with not one bit of Republican help. You know, not one bit. I get so fucking pissed off. I got it in before the rep goes up anyway. But listen, the reality is this. These Republicans who are trying to steal the vote, literally, put that over there on that side. Then they got the millionaires and billionaires trying to buy the vote. You put that on that side. And you got our president who's just fighting going forward, putting his head forward and just forward as he puts it. But they keep saying how many jobs were lost. And he never got below this percentage. For the first 6 months that he was in office, he was fighting off the results of the Bush agenda. And that result was 750 jobs a month we were losing. Just this week, just this Friday, yesterday, it came out that we've now created, since President Obama's been in office, 40 consecutive months of job growth. 40 consecutive months that have created 5.2 million private sector jobs. He's created more jobs with no Republican help in 40 months than George Bush did in 8 years. And then I also read something else this morning. That Mitt Romney on Wednesday night told 27 lies in 38 minutes. That's got to be a record. That's got to be a record. But there's so many places to pick from in his lies. You take the lies about his tax cut. And I don't mean to insult people that are what we call low information voters. People have to work really hard. They get up in the morning, all you got to do in downtown Pittsburgh is take a walk downtown between 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning. You see the people that work all night, or people that go to work, stand around their buses, they got to take the bus for an hour, they work real hard, so they can't spend all their time like I do and some of you do, sort of wallowing in politics. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the information that's out there, this president has done more with not one bit of help from the Republicans. Take health care, hang on for a minute, take health care. One of the things that makes me use that language is that you've had the last couple of months where they've been running around saying that the president wants to take $700 and some odd billion out of Medicare, and that, in fact, they've had the guts to call it stealing the money out of Medicare. Well, you know what he's doing? Pretty simple. He's taken it from the overcharge that the insurance industry was doing to its customers. He's doing it by eliminating fraud. He's doing it by eliminating waste. And then he's taking that money and he's using it to close the donut hole for seniors to save them $600 a year on drugs. Now what will Mitt Romney do? He'll do the same thing, maybe, but then he'll use it to give a tax cut to the people that already don't need one. You know? It's up to us. It's up to us to be the truth squad. It's up to us to knock on doors. I said to Rich Fitzgerald in the back, I actually think that this voter theft, which is what it is, voter suppression, I actually think it's backfiring on them. The reality is that we're registering more voters. The reality is that we're winning it in the courts. But you know what the other reality is? They've shown their hand and people are angry. We have a right to be angry. You have a right to be angry. I have a right to be angry. Every worker has a right to be angry. Because when they steal your vote, they're stealing our democracy. And if the president wins the election, but by stealing the votes, we end up with the Republican House and the Republican Senate, they're going to spend the next 4 years trying to stop him from doing anything else again. And we'll need to stand beside him. We'll need to stand by him. We'll need to stand behind him. We'll need to push him forward, because he's going to need the help. But if we do our work now, in the next month, it's actually a month from today. Today's the 6th, right? A month from today, if we've all done our work, if we've stood in line, if we've voted, if we've brought people to the polls, if we've educated, if we've told the truth, if we've done all that hard work, we will win. And President Obama will get reelected. And then someday we'll be sitting in our rocking chairs saying that because we worked so hard and we re-elected the president, we took back the House and we held the Senate and hopefully kicked Turzai and Metcalf's ass out of office eventually. And I tell you, oh man. When I drive back to Cranberry and I see Metcalf's signs, I almost want to turn off the road and run over his sign. You know? But we got to do this. One of the advantages of having a job like mine is I get to stand on a lot of podiums. And I get to look out at a lot of crowds. One of the things that scares the bejesus out of me is you stand up in these podiums and you see that the crowd ain't made up of spring chickens. You know, there's not enough young people in this room today. Okay? There's one there waving, so you're the only one. What I often say is I don't want to introduce, or I don't want to embarrass anybody by asking everybody that's under 30 to stand up and, you know, get one guy standing up. The fact is, there aren't a lot of spring chickens. But you know what? If we do our job, those kids will have a good future. If we do our job, those kids will have a good future. If we don't do our job, I'm going to finish by scaring the hell out of you. Close your eyes for a second. Think of waking up on the 7th because we didn't do enough. Think of waking up with Mitt Romney as president, Mitch McConnell as majority leader, and John Boehner as Speaker of the House. And think what they're going to try to do. As I said at the start, we've come too far. There's been too many people that made too many sacrifices. There's been too many people that were left on bridges for dead. There's been too many people who were left behind. Now's our time. Re-electing President Obama says something else that I think profoundly is very important. It says it wasn't a fluke. We mean it. And we mean to say that it doesn't matter to the majority of Americans that we have a black man in the White House. He's earned that job. We got to make sure we make that clear. I don't want that in my time as president of the Steelworkers that we don't do enough. I don't want that during my time as president of the Steelworkers we let them steal the election out from under us. I don't want during my time as president of the Steelworkers that we let them buy the election from out from under us. That bus that's out in front says it all. We need to make absolutely sure that when it's over, when the votes are counted, we've made it really clear. You can't steal the election, we're not going to let you. You can't buy the election, we're not going to let you. And we're going to win the election because we're going to be out telling the truth about our president, our party, and our vision for the country. Thank you very much.
We also needed to mention that this event is sponsored by a nonpartisan effort. Our last speaker's remarks were true and right, but I was told that I had to remind folks that we're nonpartisan here this evening. And at this next time, I would like to have Andy Miller come out. He's CWA, which is Communication Workers of America, Local 13,000. Andy is the Western Region Vice President. Andy?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. March 14th, 2012, Governor Corbett put pen to paper for House Bill 934, also known as voter suppression law. My work began on March 15th, educating my members within my local, and also reaching out to some of my retirees who have also gotten involved with the Pennsylvania for Alliance for Retired Americans to educate community members within the Pittsburgh region. To date, PARA has already educated 2,300 members within the communities of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I myself, along with my staff in my office, have educated the 3,400 members in which I represent. Good news, obviously this past week, the ruling stopped the enforcement of the law for November, so everybody will be able to vote without an ID. But our work isn't done yet. We have to continue to educate the members of our community, our families, our faiths, and let them know that just because this temporary order is there, doesn't mean this can't happen in 2013. They're going to continue to move forward. So I challenge everybody here to reach out to the members of your community and your family and educate them on what they may need in 2013 to vote. Also, I'd like you to reach out to them and have them register to vote. As Brother Gerard said, they made us angry, and now we're going to react. And we are going to take this fight to the streets. We're going to do everything we can to re-elect our President, Barack Obama. Thank you.
And to follow that with a good perspective, I think so. He says he knows, he knows. We're going to have Solid D, who is the holder of many titles, and I'm not even going to begin to start that. So, Solid.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. It's supposed to be a voter rally. We fired up? Ready to go. You fired up? Ready to go. Yeah. This ain't no funeral. This is a rally. Thanks for coming out tonight. I want to welcome to you to the August Wilson Center. How many people were here for the first time? Let me see your hands. Nobody. All right. Just a few. Well, welcome to the August Wilson Center. I'm proud to be here tonight as the co-executive director recently of the August Wilson Center. And I want to also welcome Leo Gerard. Thank you, Leo, for coming. Also, soon you'll be hearing from our county executive, Rick Fitzgerald. Welcome, Rick. And Vic Walczak. Vic Walczak is the head of the ACLU. Yeah. 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 Legal organization that brought voter ID in Pennsylvania to its knees. Yes. All right. Fired up. Yeah. Yeah. Also, the United Steelworkers. This guy about 7 feet tall, walking around here, his name is DeWitt Walton. He's the baddest steelworker I know on the road to DeWitt. And his crime partner, Kahari Mosley, he's right there somewhere. Welcome all of you for coming. They asked me to talk about the history of voter suppression. Watching that film with Dr. King, I was reminded how inspired I was when I was about 20 years old. I was on that lawn, on that mall, in Washington, D.C. when he gave that famous speech. I didn't know at the time how famous it was, but I was there. Yes. And it inspired me a little bit later to become a freedom rider. And I went down, I was assigned to go down to the Mississippi Delta. That's when I first met the fourth generation of voter suppression. It was the great-great-great-grandson of the voter of the poll tax. That's where it comes from. It's in that family of the poll tax. Poll tax was a tax They levied on the general population. That's the way the rich and powerful tried to maintain their power by keeping the vote from poor people who couldn't afford the poll tax. Well, they eventually, courts overruled the poll tax, so they came up with a new generation called the grandfather clause. So when you hear some people talking about the grandfather clause, I got grandfathered in, what they're talking about is the next generation that the rich and powerful use to keep the common people from being able to take power. And it was 2 years after we got out of slavery. They was worried about all these slaves getting ready to vote, and they came up with a law that said you could only vote if your grandfather was eligible to vote. Now you know what our grandfathers was doing around that time. Deep in slavery. That eventually got overruled and was replaced with the next generation, the literacy test. So the third generation now of voter suppression, coming down from the poll tax. Same thing. The first literacy test they used, they made you had to read the Bible. Well, they had to figure out that some of us in slavery time, that's the only thing we loved was the Bible. So they found out that some of these educated Negroes was able to read the Bible. They said, no, we got to come up with something else. So they replaced the Bible with the Constitution. They had no problem with that, though, too. Because when they held the Constitution up and asked them to read it, if they was able to read it, they didn't know whether they had read it right or not. They asked their friend, is that right? I don't know, I can't read it either. So of course they had to overrule the literacy test. So by the time little old Sam Howes got to the Mississippi Delta, around 1965, we had taken a group of farmers and sharecroppers out of the Mississippi Delta. We had to drive all the way 25 miles to the county seat in Lexington, Mississippi, to have them register to vote. And when we went in, they held up a bar of soap. Said, Negro, you can tell me how many bubbles this bar of soap, I'll let you vote. That was the fourth generation of the poll tax. Courts overruled that eventually, and with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act soon to follow, black people got to register and vote all over the South, all over the North, all over the East, all over the West. And even though our Prince of Peace that you just saw on the film got his head shot off for our right to vote, we still came back and elected the first African American president of the United States in 2009. But we got lax. Come on. Tell it. We got lax, folks. We celebrated so hard. In 2009, I can remember. Do you remember where you were when CNN announced that the next president of the United States is Barack Hussein Obama? I remember how proud I was. But we got lax, folks. We got lax, and we let the crazy-ass Tea Party take over the House of Representatives. And they ushered in the next generation of voter suppression of the Pennsylvania voter ID law. Some people ask me this evening, why Do you think that just because this is the 5th generation of voter suppression that they're going to stop? No, they're not going to stop. And they can only get away with it if we get lax again. So suppose we get Obama elected, because he ain't running against nobody. The biggest fool you ever seen in your life. So suppose we get him re-elected, are we going to get lax again? No. Next generation might be the public enemy voter suppression law. They ask you, who's public enemy? Come on. And if somebody say, that's the FBI most wanted, they may say, okay, you can go on over there and vote. They ask somebody else, who's public enemy? You say Chuck D. The fight for power, you might not be allowed to go. They're going to come up with another generation. Just because the courts have overturned this generation, doesn't mean they're not coming back. They are coming back. You can bet on it. Yep. I say our freedom depends not on the enemy not coming, but on our being ready to receive him. Yes. So my message to you this evening, aside from welcome, is don't get lax. We got work to do. We got to continue the work of the man they assassinated and all the others that they assassinated behind him. Don't get lax. We got a victory here. Vic Walczak gonna be out here in a minute. Tell you how he's a brilliant legal mind. Him and the ACLU. They was up there in the Pennsylvania courts every day, pinning them to the map. And we finally got it overturned. But it ain't over. So you fired up, ready to go? Yeah. Fired up, ready to go? Yeah. Fired up, ready to go? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is our county executive, Rich Fitzgerald. Rich.
Fired up and ready to go long before Saul got up to the podium. He didn't break Saul even more fired up and ready to go. You know, it's so inspiring when you watch Martin Luther King talk about, you know, the past and the history and the battles that we've done. You know, when it comes to, you know, 20th century figures, you know, he might not have been in a class by himself, but I'm still alive from Buck Phillips. Whatever class he's in, it doesn't take very long to call the roll, that's for sure. I'll tell you, this president, when I think about what he has gone through, not just as a president in the last 3.5, almost 4 years, but really throughout his life. You know, this is a guy that was not born with the silver spoon in his mouth by any means. He had a battle throughout his whole life. And what the other side continues to do to try to stop him is unbelievable. And this voter suppression law is just one more thing. And you know, Leo and Sala and, you know, talked about the struggles that we've had and the fights we've had. You know, and I can tell you, in Allegheny County, obviously we were going to do our own little voter ID thing that John DeFazio and I were putting in place. You could go to your Kane Hospital, you could go to the community college, and we were starting to register voters, give them IDs, not register them, but give them IDs, to make sure that people were going to vote. Because one thing people sometimes take for granted, and they think your vote isn't worth anything, let me tell you one thing. If it wasn't worth anything, they wouldn't try and steal it. They stole an election 12 years ago, if you remember. And think about what happened. Think about what happened when Al Gore had an election stolen from him. Think about where we were back then, when we were creating 2 million jobs a year. When we had budget surpluses every year. When we had peace and prosperity continuously. People were doing well. The middle class was finally moving forward. And then they stole an election. And then Bush comes in. And what happens? Chaos. Wars, stock market, you name it. You know, think about what would have happened if our president had started a war on false premises. When he does something good, they claim it's not true. Think about what would have happened if he would have done something that wasn't true. So what happens over those 8 years? Chaos, disaster. Finally, 4 years ago, we elect a president who basically was given a shovel and a broom and said, clean up the mess that George Bush and the Republicans left you. Osama bin Laden was still alive, terrorizing this country. The automobile industry was going down into bankruptcy. The financial markets were chaos. Stock markets had collapsed. And oh, here, Mr. President, here's the keys to the White House. Clean it up. We were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Nobody had confidence. Nobody was spending money. Your house values were going down. Your pension fund was going down. And then they said, our number one priority is to get rid of this president. Our number one priority, Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader of the Republicans, said, our number one priority is not to fix the country, not to create jobs, not to help the stock market, not to get rid of these wars, is to get rid of our president. Why? He's doing a heck of a job.
Yes, he is.
Just yesterday, we find out that the unemployment rate for the first time is under 8%. Since he's been president. And what do they say? They must have cheated on the numbers. You don't really have a job. That's a fiction. 5 million jobs he has created while they were fighting him at every turn. While they were saying, let's check his birth certificate. Come on. If he hadn't turned in his tax returns, what do you think they would have said? Mitt Romney doesn't have to turn in his tax returns. That's okay. Mitt Romney doesn't care about 47% of the people in this country. Come on. That's okay. If you want to do that, Fox News thinks that's great. He can do that. President Obama came in and ended the war, cleaned up that Iraq war, brought our troops home, got rid of America's number one enemy, killed Osama bin Laden, created jobs, stock market has doubled. Your pension funds, your kids' college funds, your 401ks have doubled under this president. Yes. Every single month for the last 3.5 years, we're creating jobs. Yes. They nominate a president who outsources jobs, sends them overseas, doesn't want anybody making $1 million or more to pay 1 nickel more in tax. No, he wants to take it away from seniors, from taking it away from their Medicare. Oh, he calls it a voucher system. You know what that means? It means you're not going to have enough money to pay for your health care if they get in charge. But they won't tax millionaires and billionaires 1 nickel. You know, these guys talk about freedom. They're real big on freedom. But they don't believe in the freedom to organize. No, we can't have that freedom. They don't believe in the freedom of a woman to talk about her own reproductive rights. No, we don't want that freedom. They don't want to talk about the freedom of people to vote. No, we don't want to have certain people voting. No. Not if they're going to vote for Democrats. We're going to make it tough for them to vote. Well, you know what? The more they try to do, the more I see people standing up and saying, we are not going to let our rights be taken away. Come on. We are fighting for our future. Yes. We are fighting for our kids and our grandkids and where we're going to go as a country. Yes.
Mr. Romney has no clue. I couldn't believe the lies he told the other night. And I got to tell you, I like our president, but he's got to call him out on those lies. And I think he will next time. Trying to be polite, trying to be presidential, trying to be nice, but you know what? I don't think. When Mitt Romney stands up and says, you know, the government shouldn't be involved in picking winners and losers. And then he attacked our president and said, in fact, Mr. President, when it comes to business, you pick losers and losers. Well, I can think of two companies that President Obama picked.
All right.
One was General Motors and the other was Chrysler.
All right.
Oh, and by the way, Mitt Romney's plan for the automotive industry, let him go bankrupt. That was his plan. Which plan would you rather be? I want to be with the president. Save 1.5 million jobs. Save an automobile industry that not only is for the automotive workers, but for steel workers, but for all those other companies down the supply chain that work, saving Ohio, saving Michigan, saving Pennsylvania, all the blue-collar workers and all the manufacturing workers that we have, that our president saved. I'll pick those winners and losers every day. Because I'll bet, and Mr. Obama, our president, he bet on the American worker. And that's a bet he should make every time. And let Mitt Romney say, let him go bankrupt. What do you do with your money, Mr. Romney? What do you do with your money? He sends it overseas. He bets on the Cayman Islands. That's not where I want to bet. I want to bet on America, and that's what our president bets on. We have 1 month. We have 1 month. Today's October 6th. On November 6th, this country's going to make a decision. We need to make the right decision. We need to re-elect this president who has been fighting the obstructionism in Washington like I have never seen before. But with all of that, with people hanging on, dragging him down with weights on his ankles, he continues to move this country forward. He continues to create jobs. He continues to help the middle class. He continues to help seniors, young people, investing in education. We can't let him die. He can't do it all by himself. We need to be part of that team. I'm proud to be part of that team. I'm proud that in our county, people like John DeFazio and me and Leo Gerard and Saul Udine, we're going to be out there. And Vic Volchek, what they did at the ACLU, I was so proud of the work that they did allowing people to vote.
Yes.
Our most sacred, democratic, American right is our voice. Because you know what? No matter how much money they throw, the Koch brothers and all that group, millions of dollars that they're going to throw on TV and voter suppression and everything else, on election day, your vote and my vote and her vote counts every bit as much as theirs does. We're all equal on election day. And when we stand together, when we stand with this president and what he has done, and we stand with our friends in Congress who are going to help this president, we're going to continue to move this country forward. I am so proud to be here tonight to stand with my friends and all of you. With 31 days to go, we got to make sure we do everything we can. We're going to get the word out. We're going to win. We're going to win this election on November 6th. We're going to win on President Obama. We're going to continue to be proud. Thank you very much.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have remarks and an update on the legal process from Vic Wolczak, who is the legal director of the Pennsylvania ACLU. Vic.
So I want to talk to you about voting. We think voting is pretty important.
and it has a particular resonance for me. When I was 19 years old, I went to martial law Poland. I was doing some work with the Solidarity Trade Movement. And what I saw there was that if you were caught with a flyer endorsing a trade union, you could go to jail. You could not stand up and say, I don't like the way this country's being run, because you could go to jail. But it was not only that you had no freedom, but people didn't have enough food. If they wanted to get some kind of meat, they had coupons, they had rations. They didn't have housing. You had 4 generations of people living in tiny apartments. Life was miserable. And after a couple of weeks and seeing how horrible things were, I started asking folks, if you could have one thing, what would it be? And I expected them to say, I want a nice apartment. I want a TV. I want to be able to have a car. I want to be able to speak out. But the thing I heard over and over again is we want the right to vote. And I'm just a young guy, and I'm not quite getting that. And I'm asking them, well, why voting? And they said, look, if we cannot decide who our leaders are, and once we decide, we cannot hold them accountable. If we can't vote them out of office when they do what we don't like, we have no freedom. All of these other freedoms, freedom of speech, privacy, religion, can all be taken away from us. So for me, voting is super important. So when the voter ID law was passed here in March, it was something personal. And we were, of course, going to take it on. And I was thrilled, because litigation is a wonderful thing. Right? Because people can stand up and say, oh, we got to do this because there's voter fraud. We got to do this because there's all these problems. And they can't be held accountable. Sort of like Mitt Romney the other night would say whatever he wanted without regard for the truth. Well, in litigation, you can force them to answer the question. You can prove what's right, and you can prove what's wrong. And I heard all of the critics saying that this is really about voter suppression. This is really about partisan advantage. But I like to see the good in people. I think people are basically good. And I sort of suspended my thinking. Maybe there really is something. Maybe they really were thinking that there's a good reason to have this voter ID. So I was not prepared to say that this is about voter suppression. And then we get into the litigation, and through a series of revelations over the course of the last 6 months, which damn near kicked my ass, I can tell you that, one by one, my feelings began to change. So it started with only 100,000 people don't have ID. It was kind of hard to believe. And then we're already in the lawsuit, we're starting to press them for numbers, and on July the 3rd at 3:30 in the afternoon, it's like a Wednesday, 3:30 in the afternoon, everybody's gone home, 4th of July is some big holiday, they issue a press release saying the majority of voters have photo ID, it's a great thing. And when you get down to the 4th paragraph, it says, yep, 91% of the people have photo ID. That means 9% don't. When you do the math, that's like 759,000 people. Whoops, that's a lot more than 100,000. Well, maybe there is something to this voter suppression. And then they kept saying, you know what, we got all these examples of impersonation voter fraud. So the first thing we do is we say, all right, show us all the examples. We send them something called an interrogatory. They got a list, every single example of impersonation voter fraud. And they came back and they had 9 examples. Okay, but none of them were impersonation voter fraud. What you gotta understand is that there is fraud in elections. There is definitely fraud in elections. I mean, we got a state senator from here who just went to jail for election-related fraud. We got a Supreme Court justice who's been indicted for election-related fraud. But what you need to understand is that photo ID only prevents one kind of fraud. And that's the kind of fraud where I show up at the polls and pretend to be somebody else. Impersonation voter fraud. That's the only kind of fraud that photo ID takes care of. And do you know how often that has happened in Pennsylvania in the last 10 years? 0. So on the eve of the trial, the Commonwealth signed something called stipulation, and in that stipulation they say, we are not aware of a single prosecution for impersonation voter fraud. We are not aware of even a single instance of impersonation voter fraud, and even if this law is blocked, we don't believe it's going to increase the likelihood of impersonation voter fraud. And I'm like, why are we here? Why do we have this law? And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something to that. Voter suppression. And then we're out there looking for people who might be affected by this law. Because they say, come on, show us. You know, we've been saying, show us the people who have been defrauded. And they couldn't do that. And they're saying, well, show us people who can't get ID. And we come up with hundreds of people. People like Vivian Applewhite, who is 93 years old, has voted in every single election since 1940. Every single presidential election since then. She marched with Dr. King for voting rights. She used to go to his church when she went down to visit there. But she lost her purse about 10 years ago. And while the vast majority of people do have photo ID, if you got 10% of the people who don't, that's still an awful lot of people. And who are the people who don't have photo ID? It's people who don't drive, it's people who don't fly, it's people who are largely poor, who are uneducated, who are very young, who are very old. And we started showing these folks, and the Commonwealth keeps saying, no, everybody can get ID. And then we get a memo. We get a memo written by the General Counsel from the Department of State. So litigation's a wonderful thing. And in this memo, they say, you know, we got a problem. There's all these people who really can't get a PennDOT photo ID. People who can't get a birth certificate. Black people born in Jim Crow South because they never recorded their birth. Those folks can't get ID. We got a problem. We got to make a change. So they make a change on the eve of our trial. We're ready to attack the system they got. We're ready to show that this system is corrupt. It's all about voter suppression. There's no reason to have it. And what do they say? We got a whole new system. We got a new ID. Everybody's going to be able to walk into PennDOT in 5 minutes and get that ID. So what they say is you don't need the documents. You don't need a birth certificate anymore. So what do? We put people on the stand. A woman named B. Buckler, who's 94, I tell you, I dealt with more elderly senior citizens, wonderful, tremendous people in this case. It was terrific. She's in a nursing home. She votes in the nursing home. I mean, she can't vote absentee, right? She only leaves her nursing home like twice a year, and that's just to go next door. She could not get 6 miles to the DMV, and she testified via videotape in court. And you could see her, she's shaking, she's hemming and hawing, but she says voting is so important. I gotta vote, I'm gonna vote, but I can't get to the PennDOT. And we presented another young man, an autistic young man named Taylor Floria, 19 years old. We had to bring him in the night before and put him up in a hotel because he just could not travel in one day. And he got on the stand to testify. And he had this very halting speech, but it was beautiful. He was articulate. And he talked about how his mother drove him to the DMV. It was 35 minutes away. He lived in Chester County. And that he got there, and within 10 minutes, because of all the stimuli in there, he started to shut down. And he couldn't speak, which is what happens. And they had to leave. and he couldn't complete the process. And then his mother took the stand, because we had no idea how well this young man was going to do with his disability. And he was tremendous. We really didn't have to put his mother on the stand. We put the mother on the stand to confirm what he said. And Taylor's sitting next to me, and while his mother's testifying, within about 2 minutes, he starts digging his arm into his armpit. And I put my hand on his shoulder, and I say, Taylor, are you okay? We have a quiet room in the back. Do you want to go in the back and be quiet? You could tell he was in distress. And he pulls his arm out, and he looks at me, and he says, no, I have to be here for my mother. And what does the Commonwealth argue? The Commonwealth argues we don't believe that B. Bookler or Taylor Floria aren't going to be able to vote. And even if they have to vote provisionally, they can go to, and it doesn't count, they can go to common pleas court after the election. So here's two people who just testified that they tried and cannot get to a DMV, which is where you have to go. It's the only place you can go to get that ID. And the Commonwealth says, well, they can go to court. If they can't go to DMV, they can't go to court and get a lawyer. And I start to think, well, maybe there is something about this voter suppression. And then, you know what? Any fair-minded person who would have looked at all of this evidence, that there is absolutely no justification for this law, that you are looking at close to 1 million people who don't have this kind of ID. You've got all of these individuals who are not going to be able to vote, people who have voted their entire lives. And any fair-minded person, any fair-minded judge could look at this information and come to only one conclusion. But you know what? We lost. We lost. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not voter suppression. And then you have that, what's that guy's name? Turzai. You got Turzai. Wow. Talk about a little honesty. I'm thinking, well, you know what? Maybe it is a little bit of voter suppression. And then the Supreme Court gave us a lease on life. And all 6 justices had a problem with what the judge did. They did it in different ways. It was a little odd. It wasn't the most direct thing to do. It wasn't necessarily the best thing to do. But the key is all 6 of those justices had a problem with what that judge did. And they sent it back down. And we raced, and in the space of 1 week, we went back to trial. And we were in trial for 2 days last week. And the Commonwealth came in and said, yeah, there's been problems. We put on all these folks who were told that we're not given free ID anymore. People who went and waited in line for 3-4 hours only to be told that you have the wrong kind of social security card. You had people who had to make 3, 4, 5 trips, people who couldn't get there at all, people who went and the person who processes the ID wasn't there. I mean, it was a mess. And the Commonwealth comes in and says, but wait, we're changing the process and it's going to be easier. It's going to be better. And we assure you that everybody can get ID. And then their lawyers get up and they argue 2 things. One is, voting is not a fundamental right.
Wow. Whoa. Wow.
What country are they living in? And then they get up and say, just because somebody isn't allowed to vote doesn't mean it's disenfranchisement. If the ID is theoretically available, just because they don't go and get that ID, doesn't mean it's disenfranchisement. They're lazy. And I looked at our clients. I looked at all of these courageous people who had marched into that court. The courageous people who, when we first met, said, would you maybe be willing to talk to the media? Would you be willing to go on with the Reverend Al Sharpton? That would be too much. And they sucked it up, and they got on TV, and they got on the radio, and they got in the newspapers, and they told their story. and they show the people of this state and the people of this country that they're getting a raw deal and that their right to vote is being taken away. And when I heard the Commonwealth get up there and argue that voting's not a fundamental right, that people aren't going to be disenfranchised just because they can't vote, you know what I said? This is about voter suppression. This is about partisan advantage. And we cannot let that happen because this is America and we're better than that. And I just need to make one disclaimer here, that this really is just about the right to vote and not who you vote for. We did not ask a single person what party they were registered with. We did not ask a single person who they were going to vote for. I gotta tell you, an awful lot of the folks just couldn't wait to get on the witness stand and say, I'm voting for Barack. That's their right, that's free speech. But this is really about the right to vote. And unless every eligible elector in this state has the opportunity to go into that polling place and vote on that electronic voting machine, then this country is going down the tubes and we're not going to let that happen. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your support.
Okay, I'm hearing a lot about voter suppression, and the next step is voter protection on election day. And at the registration table, any of you that are willing to help out for that, for voter protection, you can sign up there. And if you know of anyone who still needs to register to vote, there's voter registration forms at the table as well. At this time, we're going to ask Dawn Jones to come. He's a voting rights advocate and activist. Dawn?
I'm here tonight to talk to you about the Stop and Read agenda. I know you saw that bus out front. Everybody saw that. The majority, who has set out to educate people on the political agenda of the Koch brothers. I come to you tonight from a row-home, working-class family out of North Philadelphia. They taught me that education, showing up to work every day, was my responsibility and my duty. They also told me that when my country called and was under attack, it was also my duty to show up and fight as an American citizen. I love coming to this city because it reminds me so much of Philadelphia. This is a great city, and this city was built by working hands. This city's children were taught by working class family hands. This city's very existence depends today on working class families. Working class families that belong to the steel workers, teachers, building trades, the teamsters, ASCII, and on down the line. Hands that belong to workers who make a pitiful minimum wage. Pitiful. Hands that go out every day and help this city and keep this city alive. Hands that keep our great military and defend this country all around the world. All of these hands, labor, military, workers, all of these hands are the patriot majority. The Koch brothers, well, we all know what their agenda is. But let me just run down a few things. One of them, outsource jobs. Why? It's easy for them to make money. Keep down the minimum wage. Why? Again, for them to make more money. Privatize education and Social Security so they can make more money. Change the environment laws and control the price of oil and gas in this country so they can make more money. And the biggest one, the biggest thing that they want to do is change the voting laws in this country. And why? So we can't stop them from making more money. They will push their agenda to make more money in every election. This election is important but every election is going to be important because these guys will be playing for their agenda in the presidential election right down to a dog catcher's election. This year or the next, they won't give up. And we only have one thing that we can do to stop them. There's one thing that they're scared of. And that is, they're scared to death of a well-educated, well-informed public is capable of critical thinking. What they are afraid of is a united Patriot majority. My name is Don Jones, and I am a member of the Patriot majority. Thank you, Mr.
I want to say a couple things before I introduce or reintroduce Leo. Voter suppression and the efforts to deny our community, senior citizens, and the disadvantaged the right to vote threatens our very existence. We have to be truly offended, and we have to use this as a call to battle to make certain that the people who are attempting to perpetrate this crime on our community are punished in such a way that everybody that follows them clearly understand the price they will have to pay to try it again. It is our time, it is our responsibility to go out in every way and in every turn from now till we repeal this horrendous legislation to punish folks that don't do what we need them to do. It is about us. It is truly about us. If we don't do it, we can't blame nobody but us. We talk about it every day about the wrongs that go on in our society. And I ask, I beseech you, I beg you, from now till then, let's go to work. Let's go to work. Thanks. Let's go to work. It is truly a privilege for me to be standing here tonight because this event, co-sponsored by the A. Philip Randolph Institute, the NAACP, the United Steelworkers, and CWA, it would not be happening without the early understanding of the challenges that we face. And I'm here to reintroduce Leo, but the fight that is being led in so many ways by the steelworkers was understood over a year ago about voter suppression and the strategy that folks were trying to employ to deny us our right to cast a vote. President Gerard empowered our Vice President of Human Affairs, Fred Redmond, to move across this country and to put steelworkers out on lost time for us to pay their salaries, to go out and to carry the message in the communities in which we live, we serve, and we care about every day. Leo went and helped the Pittsburgh A. Philip Randolph chapter raise money here at the August Wilson Center on April 27th that we're using today to pay for the things that we're doing on a daily basis. The Pittsburgh A. Philip Randolph Institute, since April, has generated over 60,000 phone calls to African American households across the western third of Pennsylvania. We've registered over 1,700 voters. And Leo's back here telling me I'm giving the speech. And that's the kind of boss that he is. Because again, you know, it's about us doing what we need to do. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Leo. What'd you say, Sally? I want to use 4 words to describe Leo. As from his earlier presentation, you guys already know that he's knowledgeable, that he's committed, that he's blunt, and that he's passionate. Those are the words that I like to think describes him and the kind of leadership that he provides on a daily basis to ensure that we get our fair share, to change the face of the union, to change the image of the union, and rebuild that Black Labor Alliance. So with that, I want to reintroduce my boss, Leo Gerard.
It's funny because I said to DeWitt today, I said, give me some notes on all the things you've accomplished so that when I get up there, I can thank you for all that you've done. And I'm sitting back there and he's giving off everything he's accomplished. But let me, I've got a real privilege to be here with you today. And I've been in Pittsburgh now for 19 years. And one of the things that disturbs me a lot, and I talked to Fred Redmond and DeWitt about it a lot, is that I don't think that A. Philip Randolph gets or got the credit he deserves for helping to build the labor movement. The A. Philip Randolph work that he's done. And as an outsider who's had to learn, I realized that there probably wouldn't have been a Martin Luther King if there hadn't been an A. Philip Randolph. And all of that work, and too much of that is left out in our schools and in our labor movement's history. If you think about what A. Philip Randolph did, there was no cell phones, there weren't even pay phones. And he managed to organize people who worked on the railway from one end of the country to the other, without cell phones, fax machines, or anything else. He did it because he was able to talk to people in a way that touched their heart, and they realized that to accomplish things, they had to stand together. And when he demonstrated that that could be done, that was the start of building the movement. And that was the heart of building what was then the CIO as well. So in my work, I'm tremendously proud of the work that A. Philip Randolph does. Our Vice President, Fred Redmond, is also the chairman of the board of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and he spends lots of time going around the country and building chapters. And the important thing about the A. Philip Randolph Institute is whether it's in Pittsburgh, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's in LA or anywhere else, it has to be seen as the alliance between the African American community and the labor movement. It has to be seen that we walk together, we march together, we lock arms together, we fight for the same kind of things. We fight to have the kind of democracy where everybody gets to vote. We fight to make sure that there's a ladder up to the middle class. We make sure that no one gets up there and then cuts the ladder out from under them and that there's no path up for everyone else. And as was said at the Democratic Convention, it's important that when someone has burst through the door of opportunity, that they don't close the door behind them. And that's really what Mitt Romney is doing. He was born into opportunity, and in fact, he was born sliding into home plate, and he actually thought he did the hit. The reality is that the A. Philip Randolph is a tremendously important institution. And I just want to take a minute to talk about some of the stuff that they've done in Pittsburgh so far in this election. 66,000 phone calls have been registered. 1,700 voters have had their voter ID corrected prior to the court case. 1,800 other voters have been assisted to register early. And we've had an additional 100 voters that we've registered as well. So that if you look at that, prior to this important victory that we had just in the last few days, a victory that, by the way, none of us should take for granted. I couldn't agree more with what DeWitt said. Those that had the gall, the audacity, and the arrogance to believe that they could rob people of their vote by being tricky, as Saladin said, by the fifth incarnation of voter suppression, they need to be punished. They need to be punished the next time their turn comes up to the ballot box. We need to turn out. I don't care if we're running a pigeon against it. I once said that I would vote for I would vote for a seagull or a statue before I would vote for a Republican. And somebody said, why? I said, first of all, the seagull will shit on the statue and the statue ain't gonna hurt me because of it. Now, you know if you elect a Republican, you're gonna get hurt somewhere along the line. So, that's to me something that I don't ever want to forget, that our obligation is always about protecting those that came before us and to stand up for those that are coming next. And for me, at the point I'm at in my life, I can say, as I said earlier, I get angry every morning. The morning that I'm not angry is the morning I'm going to go apply for my retirement, because it'll never be, you know, if I'm too happy, I don't deserve to be there. Because in my lifetime, we've never had justice yet. But the morning that I wake up and I'm too happy because we accomplished too much, I'm headed for the rocket chair. You know? But let me just again say that it's tremendously important that we never forget what David just said. We have to make sure that we not only win this election for President Obama. I mean, I could, just like all the other speakers that were up here, I could go on forever about what he's accomplished. And I could never say enough. But I always have to remember that whatever he accomplished while he was dragging the Republicans along with him. That not one time, except passing of the economic renewal, so-called stimulus, where Arlen Specter voted with him, and then the Republicans harassed Arlen Specter right out of the party. Okay. So we need to remember that he did this on his own. So we not only have to elect him, but we've got to work this cycle and the next cycle to make sure that before he finishes his second term, he's got a Democratic majority in the House and a Democratic majority in the Senate. And then we need to deal with what they've done in the Pennsylvania State House. Yes. We need to deal with what they tried to do in the Ohio State House, and in Wisconsin, and in Detroit. You know, I'm privileged. I get to travel not only across North America, but I get to go to do some work in Europe, because we created a new global labor federation called Industrial with 50 million members, and I'll be there in December as part of the executive committee. And when I meet with folks from around the world, when I'm doing my work, they will actually question me. They'll say things like, is it true that the governor of Michigan can just decide that a town's not doing good and fire everybody that was elected and put in someone who's going to be called the manager and he can void all the contracts and he can do all that stuff? That can't happen in America, can it? I said, well, it just did. You know, think about what they're doing in Pennsylvania. Think about what they're trying to do on Medicare. They're trying to divide seniors from the soon-to-be seniors from the not-so-far-away seniors. You know, if you're in a family and your brother's 56 and you're 53, you're going to get two kinds of Medicare. Your brother is going to get a voucher. And each year, as medical inflation goes higher than regular inflation, and regular inflation is like this, in 10 years there'll be a gap. Who's paying for that gap? The 53-year-old now, or the 48-year-old, and they say that by 2030, Medicare will be broke. So if you think about what will happen to the 18-year-old now, or the 38-year-old, they won't have it. And what will you do then when you're old? Agency was going to give me the best deal with my voucher. Okay?
Go to the emergency room.
Yeah, well, Romney said go to the emergency room. That's what the expensive care is. So that this is a huge challenge for all of us.
That's right.
Reverend Al Sharp.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First, let me thank all of you that have gathered here tonight, our hosts, our friends, and brothers and sisters in the labor movement, certainly those in the A. Philip Randolph Institute here in Pittsburgh, people that we worked with the collective, Judith Moore and Sylvia Wilson, Dean Walton, others that have been laboring. This is a critical time, if there ever was one. I know that we're used to hearing people say how every election is the most important election. But it is very important we understand that there is a lot at stake that has been put into these efforts that we've not seen in many years. It is no coincidence to me that we've seen a series of events that have led to try and disenfranchise and in many ways erase what labor and civil rights achieved 40 and 50 years ago. First, they came with a Citizens United decision to take the cap off how much money you can spend on elections. The idea of that is if they could take the cap off of how much money could be spent, that the private sector could then pour in unlimited resources to reverse rights and to break unions. Because at the same time we saw Citizens United, we saw the Tea Party. They elect over 60 members of Congress, elect some reactionary governors in various states, including this one. And the first thing they do is go after labor. Why go after labor? One, because labor has been the backbone of resources for progressives. And two, because if they can have a workforce that cannot organize and protect themselves, is more profit for them. It's really that simple. If you can have a workforce that can't question you about wages, about pensions, billionaires become trillionaires. And they reverse the psychology by acting like if you ask for just proper wages, proper health care, and proper pensions, then you are imposing your will and breaking the economy. So let me get this right. They can make all the money in the world, send their money out of the country, don't pay any tax on it, get subsidized by the government, too big to fail. If they do fail, we got to bail them out, but we the ones breaking the economy. Come on. But they get in there. In order to make this effective, eliminate the money, go after labor, and then we've got to suppress the vote so that as many people that we can, that we know are going to vote against us, would have a difficult to impossible task. So what do they come up with? Vote ID laws, ending early voting. Now, a couple of fallacies. One, they start telling people, well, you got to have ID to ride an airplane, you have to ID to do everything else. Why wouldn't you have ID to vote? We were never opposed to ID. We were opposed to these new government photo IDs. The position that all of us took was that let's use the ID we always used. So act like we wasn't using ID. We always used ID. Let's use the same ID that we used when Reagan was running, and Bush was running, and Clinton was running, and Bush Jr. was running. How do we get to the re-election of Obama, and all of a sudden we need some new ID? What's wrong with the ID we was already using? So don't act like we didn't want no ID, it's this new ID. Well, we got to stop fraud. Where is it? Went to Justice Department, 0.0003% fraud, less than 1%. So it was a solution looking for a problem, rather than a problem looking for a solution. The Brennan Institute did a study. 5 million people that voted in 08 stood to not be able to vote in this election if those ID laws stood in all of those 19 states. This was not about ID. The only fraud in voter fraud was the fraud that there is voter fraud. Now, let me show you how it keeps going. Money, stacks against union, voter ID, then the Supreme Court. This Wednesday, the Supreme Court is going to hear the arguments for the University of Texas on affirmative action. In this session, they have on the calendar to hear Voting Rights Act 65, same-sex marriage. We are under a full assault. If they revoke the Voting Rights Act and affirmative action, they will in effect undo what Dr. King and A. Philip Randolph and Bob Ruskin and Dr. Heitman did in the 60s. If they say, I remember now last time affirmative action went in front of the court, they said, well, race can be a factor. They did a moonwalk, didn't go all the way, a factor. Now they can take it where it can't be a factor. If they take race out as a factor in higher education, affirmative action, they can then use that as a precedent to say, well, it can't be a factor in contracts, can't be a factor in diversity employment, can't be a factor in the workforce, so they can fire everybody. It would be unconstitutional to say we need a certain amount of blacks and Latinos in departments. Race cannot be a factor. I'm not talking about 65, I'm talking about Wednesday they argue that. Voting Rights Act, scheduled for this session. If they say it is unconstitutional, it is no longer needed. We no longer have the protection of 65 Voting Rights Act. We are under assault. And many of us not organizing to come back. And that is why they have to try and break labor. Because the best war in the world to fight is if you can take the ammunition of your opponent, then declare war and know they have no artillery to fight you.
That's right. That's right.
Next year is the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. Dr. King made a speech there out of a dream. But the march was called by labor. Let's not get confused. It was not the Dream March. It was a march for jobs and justice called by A. Philip Randolph. King spoke at the march. A lot of folks think they had a dream march. Didn't nobody know about the dream that they got there. That's why you can always tell folk lying about they were there. Because they tell you, I went to the Ivy Dream March. It wasn't the Ivy Dream March. You know, folks just lie. I'm in Lake Airport, Pittsburgh. I voted to be for president. If everybody stopped me voting to be president, we'd be having this meeting in the East Room of the White House. Folks just lie. We need to organize and quit lying. Because the other side is organizing and they're not playing games. I just saw one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. For 18 months, Mitt Romney played possum. And then all of a sudden, Wednesday night, he got all his sense together. Here's a man didn't know A from Z, but he all of a sudden become brilliant Wednesday night. We can't be that stupid. Now, all the commentators said how Romney did so well. Well, let me get this right. If I came in here tonight and made an eloquent, inspiring speech about how wonderful y'all all look in those white mink draped suits and those chairs that's dripping in ermine. If you know you don't have on a white suit and you sit in an ermine chair, how can you be inspired when you know I'm standing up here lying? If Romney stood up there saying he did not advocate a $5 trillion cut, he has a health care plan that covers pre-existing conditions, and that he cares about the poor and the middle class, and you know he's lying, how can you say he did a good job when he gave an eloquent lie? And rather than everybody say, well, that man lied, they'll be, what happened to Obama? Well, whatever happened to Obama, this man lied. This man advocated $5 trillion cut, said he was not going to raise taxes on the rich, so the only place that can come out of is middle class folk and poor folk. This man stood up there and said that his health program covers pre-existing conditions when it does not, and his own campaign had released that after. He stood up there and said he cared about the middle class and poor when we run over and over again a tape of him saying 47% are dependent on the government and they don't want to assume their responsibilities, their mooches off the government. How you gonna stand up there and watch a man lie to your face and act like he's a skillful debater? He's a skillful liar. And that's why we've got to really organize. Now, one thing they didn't expect is that some of us are going to fight back. And when you won that decision in Pennsylvania this week, you struck a blow for freedom all over this country. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, but my mother was from Alabama. So I used to have to go down south once a year, visit her relatives. I had an uncle down in Dothan, Alabama called Buddy Boy. Buddy Boy used to tell me about hunting. They would go rabbit hunting. And a couple of them, every once in a while, go bear hunting. I noticed that most of my relatives didn't like bear hunting, but they all like rabbit hunting. And I asked him, I said, Buddy Boy, why don't everybody go bear hunting, but everybody like rabbit hunting? He said, well, because with rabbits, you shoot, they run from you, and you just keep running after them till you can hit them in the behind. He said, but if you shoot at a bear and you miss, you're going to end up being the bear's lunch. Then Buddy Boy looked at me, I never forgot, he said, I'll tell you something, rabbit hunting wouldn't be fun if the rabbit get the gun. In Pennsylvania this week, the rabbits turned the gun back. They thought you were going to roll over intimidated, because in 2010 we didn't show up and vote, and that's how they got there. We got to pick up the gun and start firing back. If they want to fight, then we need to give them a fight. We are not folks that are not going to sit here and allow them to strip us of our rights. Let me be clear. Nobody gave us the right to vote. Nobody woke up one morning and said, let's be nice to everybody. We fought and suffered to get the right to vote. People gave their lives, gave up their career, lost their families to get us the right to vote. Many others went home one night, pulled in his driveway. 3 beautiful children inside, beautiful wife. Man blew his brains out in his driveway. Give us the right to vote. 3 little girls was in church one Sunday morning. 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Man put dynamite in the church and killed those little girls. None of them became teenagers to give us the right to vote. Goodman, Cheney, and Swerve, 2 Jews and a black, mowed down in Alabama with their eyes open. Because they went down there organized to give us the right to vote. They bombed churches, bombed homes. Here you are, 45 years later, sitting up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Nobody shooting at you. Nobody bombing your house. Nobody waiting in the bushes in your driveway. Just too lazy and ungrateful to protect what others died to give you. Somebody got to beg you to stand up for yourself. I mean, look at the facts now. Got the first health bill since Teddy Roosevelt. All the pre-existing community and the pre-existing condition in our community. All the jobs we need. All of the fact that they've taken any kind of comfort and protection for workers. And somebody got to beg you to vote. Somebody got to beg you to organize. You realize that Dr. King and Dr. Hyde and A. Philip Randolph and them turned this country upside down and never had a fax machine? They organized and changed the most powerful nation in the world on rotary phones and Greyhound buses. Here you are with laptops in every office, computers all over your house, BlackBerry in one pocket, 2 cell phones in another, and can't get 5 folk together to do nothing. We have more to work with and get less done. It's time for us to return to the same spirit of those that broke the door open for us in the first place. Well, you know right now, Chris Christie's tough, Corbett's tough. We fought tougher governors than this. We had governors that would stand in the door with troops. How you scared of guys that if you stood up to them, you could back them? They won because we didn't show up to the fight. But we need to show up this time. And we need to show out because our very lives are at stake. This is not about who we like. This is our rights. You talk about revoking voter rights. This is our rights. You talk about revoking health care. These are our rights. You talk about they want to change Medicaid. They want to solve the deficit on the backs of those that didn't cause the deficit. They gave a tax cut to the rich, came with 2 wars, took a surplus economy, drove it into a deficit, and the folk that had nothing to do with the deficit, they want us to pay for it. Well, we need shared sacrifice. We didn't have a shared party. want to have a party with champagne, don't invite me and then hand me the tab talking about we got to share the something. You had the party, you had the champagne, you paid for the party. That's why I said when they start messing with Medicare, that's why I made that slogan. This ain't about Obama, it's about your mama. That's cute. They just cute. If they're talking about changing health care on seniors to balance billionaires' books, then what is wrong with us that we sit here acting like that makes sense? Then Romney gonna say, and I'm nonpartisan, I'm just giving a view. Difference between nonpartisan and nonsensical.
That's right. That's right.
Romney said we need a cross-the-board cut. No, it wasn't a cross-the-board investment. Middle-class people didn't cause this deficit. Working-class people didn't cause this deficit. And to stand up to workers and tell them that you don't need union protection. Trust us. But if we don't have labor, who's going to protect us? Trust us. We got you. We the guys that look out for you. Don't you know us? Yeah, we do. And we act like that makes sense. Right. The conversation going on is an insult to the intelligence of the American people. Yeah. We've got about a month left to organize and bring voters out like we never brought them out before. Right. Why? Not just for re-election, but to preserve the rights and integrity of the movement that brought us this far. We not only owe it to those that suffered to get us here, we owe it to our children, that we not lose in their future what was provided for us. This may be the first generation that gives its children less rights than they got. Every generation, we expanded the rights of workers. We expanded the rights of minorities. If this Supreme Court reverses things, we will lose those rights in our generation. Whoever's elected president November 6th will appoint 1 to 3 Supreme Court justices. This is a little deeper than did Obama come by your fish fry. Come on. This is not about who you like. This is about whether you like yourself. And everybody is in this predicament. They declared war on civil rights, immigrant rights, women's rights, all of them. Don't organize labor. Don't organize civil rights. Immigrants, we're going to run out of the country if you from Mexico. If you immigrant from somewhere else, you cool. Women, we're going to tell you what you can do with your body. And we're going to decide to make everybody go by the religion we believe. Well, Reverend, I can't vote because I believe a certain way and the president and them don't believe that way. Well, what president ever believed everything you believe?
That's right.
I was in South Carolina the other day, meeting with some of the black preachers. Right now, we're not with the president because he said that he didn't have a problem with gay marriage. I said, well, he didn't say he was passing a bill, he gave an opinion. Yes, but I can't be with anyone with that opinion. I said, wait a minute. I thought when I landed, they said it's South Carolina. It is. And y'all talk about telling your parishioners not to vote because the president has an opinion? Yes. I said, well, let me ask you something. Your governor told everybody he was hunting in Virginia. And he was in South America with his girlfriend. Did y'all tell folks don't vote then?
I mean, we done had folk not give an opinion you didn't agree, but commit to sin you preach against. And you never talked about not voting. So now you buck dancing, backbiting off the time. When the time to take a final. And impose something now that you never imposed before. We're not that stupid. If you done sold out, say it. But don't use God to cover you getting 30 pieces of silver. We've got to stop entertaining foolishness. Well, Reverend Allen, you know, I'm all with the organizing and all, but, you know, some of the unions, steel workers, SEIU, little abrasive. We've got to do it different. Well, how should we do it? Well, you know, it's a new day. Well, what day is it? Well, you know, we got a new style. What is it? If you scared, say you scared. Don't act like you got a new strategy. Don't act like you figured out something that we can't figure out. Say I'm scared and sit down and shut up and let somebody who's not scared stand up and say what got to be said. There ain't no nice way to talk to folk that's trying to take the bread off your table. Ain't no negotiation with folk that have come at your work that you've invested in Social Security all your life and they're going to take it from you. What are you negotiating about? They have said that they're going to take back what we earned, and we got to stand up and say, no, you're not. And we've got to organize like we never organized before, and every time we've stood up, we won. If you stand up, we win. If you sit down, you lose because you wouldn't stand up. So I come tonight to salute those in Pennsylvania that have stood up and fought these voter ID laws and won this round. But the fight is not over. We got to keep fighting and deliver a vote November 6th. We have to keep fighting and protect collective bargaining. We have to keep fighting and protect Voting Rights Act. We have got to keep fighting and protect Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. We are the children of fighters. We are the children of those that survive. We are not those that run and are afraid. We are those that can look death in the face and know that right is stronger than might. In my life, I had a birthday Wednesday. I've seen too much to know that we can't win. I've seen dark days. I've seen nights in jail. I've spent nights in hospitals. But I remember standing there in the square in Johannesburg in '94 and watched them lower the flag of apartheid and raise the flag of the ANC. I watched Nelson Mandela, after 27 years of jail, walk from prisoner to president. I know we can win. I stood there in January 2009 and watched them bring out Abe Lincoln's Bible, and I watched a black man named Barack Obama put his hand on the Bible and become the 44th president of the United States. I know we can win. If we stand up, if we stand together, if we organize together, if we quit our pettiness and join together, we can win. We won before, we can do it again. Thank you, God. Clearly it was more than identification because there was no fraud problem. So how are you solving something that was not a problem? So when they could not even bring the evidence to the court to establish, one, what they were rectifying, and two, how it would not impede people from voting, it became very transparent that this was about more than what they were saying. And that is why we're resisting it all over the country. I think the win in Pennsylvania gave a lot of confidence and a spirit of determination to people around the country that have been fighting. I've been fighting, as they said tonight, from day one. Pennsylvania was the victory we needed because it not only showed that we're right by law, it also showed we could win by tactics. Right. Oh yeah, our very serious concerns. The Supreme Court in this session is going to review voter rights. The Supreme Court is going to review affirmative action starting October 10th. So we are on the brink of seeing the possible reversal of many things that were won in the civil rights movement in the 60s even before my time. And I'm very concerned about that. And I'm as concerned that a lot of people do not know these things are at risk and these things are at stake. Just like they did not know the voter ID laws had just changed. And one of the things that we're doing is trying to inform people and then mobilize and organize people to resist. I think that we give people too much of a cop-out. Young people say to me, well, I wasn't back in the days of selling. Well, neither was I. I wasn't old enough to go to selling. But unless you under 8 months old, you was around when Trayvon Martin happened. Unless you under 80 years old, you was around when Katrina happened. There wasn't a city that was underwater 4 days without federal response in the 60s. So we've had enough issues for young people to understand in unfairness. And let us quit copping out. Young people are facing inequality now. They don't have to go back 40 years. Right now, look at the inequality in education in Pennsylvania. Right now, look at the disproportionate unemployment of blacks and whites in Pennsylvania. So let's not act like that's back in the day. We're still in the day. I think that some of us got into the illusion of acceptance, that we felt that everything was all right. And I think that when we did that, we began seeing the schisms and the inequality gap broaden. And I think we've made a lot of progress. But you don't go a few yards up the road and relax because you went a few yards up the road. You still are not arrived at your destination. I want them to think about the fact that there are efforts in the courts and in the legislative bodies that are not thinking about but have already designed legislation and laws to reverse the things that we've taken for granted. And if we do not show up and vote, we've co-signed the end of our